Hello and a very warm welcome to a brand new edition of World Panorama with me, Frank Pereira. Let's begin as always with the latest international headlines. US Secretary of State John Kerry meets Prime Minister Narendra Modi on the last day of his India visit, says Obama looking forward to meeting the Prime Minister in September. 72-hour ceasefire between Israel and Hamas fails after Israeli soldier goes missing. Fresh shelling kills several Palestinians. Palestinians say that they are no longer welcome at Cairo peace talks. WTO trade deal called off after India remains firm on its stand. US voices concern, says India's stand sends wrong signals. And Jacques Kallis retires from all forms of international cricket. Decision comes after his poor showing in the ODI series against Sri Lanka. All-rounder will continue to play domestic T20 cricket. Our top focus this week, US Secretary of State John Kerry met Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Friday morning while on his three-day visit to India. Kerry said that US President Barack Obama is looking forward to meeting Narendra Modi in September to set an ambitious new agenda to chart out a new course in the bilateral ties. But Kerry told Modi that India's refusal to sign the WTO trade deal has sent wrong signals to Washington. Here's more.
Visiting US Secretary of State John Kerry on Friday discussed bilateral issues with Prime Minister Narendra Modi. The 40-minute-long meeting with the 7 Racecourse Road comes a day after Kerry met External Affairs Minister Christopher S Raj for the 5th India-US Strategic Dialogue. The two leaders discussed bilateral issues and strategic relations between the two countries. Kerry said US President Barack Obama is looking forward to the first summit meeting with the Prime Minister in Washington in September.
The Prime Minister is on record as having said that the developmental challenges that developing countries face are something that needs to be understood by all. India as a developing country has challenges and a responsibility to ensure food supplies to all its people. Our direction is determined by our current circumstances.
मैं समझता हूं कि दोनों देशों के बीच में बहुत से जो मुद्दे थे उन पे समझौता के तरफ बातचीत तो हो ही गई होगी और अब जो बात होगी वो नरेंद्र मोदी जी की जो अमेरिका यात्रा है उसको कितनी सफल बना सके.
But John Kerry also conveyed to Prime Minister Modi that India's firm stand that blocked the WTO trade deal has sent out wrong signals. After the meeting, a US State Department official said, and I quote, "Failure to sign the trade facilitation agreement sent a confusing signal and undermined the very image Prime Minister Modi is trying to send about India." During the hour-long meeting, Kerry and US Commerce Secretary Penny Pritzker also briefed the Prime Minister on the India-US strategic dialogue that took place on Thursday. In one of the side meetings, Pritzker met Power Minister Piyush Goyal on Friday. Goyal said that energy is one of the sectors where the two nations are looking for cooperation.
Both sides have agreed that we should take the dialogue on energy, particularly clean energy, forward very quickly. We are looking at some quick wins, and we are fairly confident that in the next 2 months, we will be able to make some rapid strides.
All eyes now will be on the September summit between Modi and Obama, where a number of announcements regarding strategic relations in key areas are expected.
And joining me today on the show, we have with us a very special guest, Professor Christopher S Raj of the JNU. Welcome to the show, Professor. And let's talk about this particular visit of John Kerry now, of course, who's come down to India or who was in India for 3 days. What do you make of this visit of John Kerry and what do you believe are the main takeaways as far as both India and the US are concerned?
Well, first and foremost, this is the first direct contact with the Indian leadership. Mr. Modi came to power in May last month, May 16th, and the new leadership need to be sensitized. And for that, I think this is the first meeting together, understanding each other. So the joint, statement more or less is a repetition of most of the issues. When I looked at the joint statement which was issued yesterday, And I found, it talks about, first and foremost, it talks about cordial relation between both, their commitment to world peace, and also moves on to the nuclear issues. India's being part of the nuclear group, and America is trying to facilitate its increasing membership into Wasner group. So and it further moves into issues of participation, and it also touches the aspects of clean energy, which the minister just now spoke. There is going to be more discussion. And then it comes into the aspect of nuclear commerce. That comes about 6th or 7th item, nuclear commerce. And what is the hitch that we have on the nuclear commerce? And you find there is a lot of problem from the Indian side because we have passed an indemnity law. And thanks to Bush administration, it was able to work out a nuclear understanding by 2008. And the nuclear commerce, because of our passing of the nuclear indemnity law, which is above the international standard types of indemnity the suppliers should provide. But one should understand the nuclear commerce indemnity was passed against the background of the anniversary of what happened in Bhopal, and at that point of time, the Eveready company had no compensation to offer, and all those things were bitter for the Indian public. So the political reflection of that happened in this indemnity, and they pitched high on the aspect of indemnity in terms of suppliers' responsibility.
As far as this particular visit is concerned, it was overshadowed by one particular issue, the WTO trade deal. Now, how much of pressure do you see Americans putting on India going forward as far as this deal is concerned? Do you see this deal being shelved completely because of India's position, or how do you see it going forward?
No, I don't think every international agreement, if you see climate change, there has been a part of understanding was to give consideration to developing nation. And the question with Modi ji raised is they cannot ignore poverty and this is related to the subsidies that the Indian government gives and stocking of the grains that we have. And the primary, the issue is in terms of stocking of rice and wheat, oil and fertilizer subsidies. Now, in this thing, negotiations will have to go. While he was on 30th or 31st, he even said compromise could be worked out.
Yes.
But the compromise did not come through because they were thinking that they can push it through because
using force.
Using their presence here and direct touch, and also final element will be discussed in 2017. But India was clear. They had a problem of criticism that these stocking had a problem of waste, and they were stocking more than 3 times needed. So India will have to address this criticism. And also the subsidies in terms of distribution is a problem. It is doing very well in midday meal in Tamil Nadu, but not doing in other parts of India. So monitoring so they have to justify. I think if they have a clean record on monitoring of our stock, and also of distribution, we have a reason that we cannot ignore our poor and poverty, and which is the basic, if democracy is to survive, the people need to be fed and to be active. And so India cannot ignore this aspect. The Western world, even in the United States, I must say, I am teaching in the United States, they have a welfare program. Subsidies are given. The poor is given stamps. They can provide stamps, they can acquire stamps. The poor can go and get food from the any shop on giving those stamps. When the rich nation is also caring for the food, but the poor in that lot is less, but our poor are larger number, so they need to take into. So where they would lead into concession and understanding in the next 2 years is, we may make a concession in terms of oil, which we are also stopped. In terms of fertilizers, we may reduce little percentage of subsidies. And so these are areas where but rice and wheat, I think that is the staple food for the poor. They need to be regulated and some concession for the developing nation. India, Modi's word says, should be a perpetual concession to India on this aspect. Maybe some understanding, maybe another 10 years. And when the poors are improved and their stock is improved, these things will work better. I think India will stand by it. And given the world scene, America's power is not very influential.
Indeed.
Because they have failed in Iraq, they have failed in Syria,
they
have failed in
Middle East,
Egypt,
and yes.
and they are going to fail in Pakistan too, because the terrorism is not contained in all this area. Where they are left, the terrorists are back in power.
Yeah, and that's quite evident, isn't it? Because the Americans are losing hold of the world, and they're trying to reach out to as many influential people as possible, and that's what we've seen with India as well. John Kerry is not the first dignitary to have visited India. There have been several in the past. After Modi took over, of course, Chuck Hagel is also slated to visit India in a few weeks from now. So the Americans are reaching out to India, and both sides, of course, are trying to mend some of the ties that were disrupted because of the Devyani Khobragade incident, because of the nuclear deal, and several of those other issues as well.
So the one term that I saw in the newspaper, rebooting. Things really got soured in the last 1 year. Obama did not make any progress. Indo-US relations were in cold storage for different reasons, in terms of intellectual property rights, in terms of opening up. We have just opened up 49%, the investment could take place. And in defense and railways, infrastructure, that's a big thing. Only 2% is in the hands of India, whichever private companies. So that has been solved. So opening up India has been solved in up to 49%. On intellectual property right needs to be solved, although we are on the list of countries which are here monitored by the United States. But the point rebooting is very essential, because India has done a marvelous thing under the leadership of Modi ji, having done in BRICS meeting. They have set up a parallel banking system, and also considered to the headquarters of BRIC being stationed, the bank being stationed in Shanghai. So
the first president being
India. So they are also parallelly they are moving.
Yes.
In the trilateral relation between China, India, and United States, India is a very important role. Both China, after the big BRICS happening, the Chinese have said, we would like to include you in the Asian Pacific Economic Cooperation, APAC. And we would like to include you there, which has been so far minus India, although we are part of the East Asia Summit. So these are, India cannot be a pushover.
Indeed, India cannot be a pushover, and the message also is very clear from this new government. They are saying that we cannot be a pushover, and it's come through very clearly as far as the WTO deal, trade deal is concerned. They've not been pressurized by the US or anyone else,
right.
And that's very evident, isn't it? Now, talking about Prime Minister Modi's visit to, of course, Washington in September, do you think the path has been paved for this particular visit? How do you see it going forward?
I think the level of bureaucracy and the ministers involved are already in touch with each other. So they have now sensitized each other's view. Only the leadership has to meet in September. So there will be a working heart. These things, even our Prime Minister Manmohan Singh, when he signed the joint statement in July 18, 2005, till the last movement on nuclear deal was still a problem.
Yes, it was very iffy, wasn't it?
Yeah, if. And things are coming out now, more detail. There could have been a touch and go. But finally, President Bush decided politically to be supporting India. And that support is essential. India in Asia is important.
India in Asia is very, very important, because strategically also, we have relations with Israel, we have relations with Palestine, the Arab world, China now, of course, a little bit. So India's role will be extremely crucial. Thank you so much, Professor, for joining us on the show this week and sharing your perspectives on this very crucial subject. Appreciate you being here with us.
Thank you, Frank, for giving me this opportunity. We'll meet each other. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It's time for a short break now, but on the other side, we'll tell you all about how the 72-hour humanitarian ceasefire between Israel and Palestine failed a few hours after it began. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're watching Rajya Sabha Television. Well, shelling in Rafah killed at least 50 Palestinians on Friday as a 72-hour humanitarian ceasefire crumbled a few hours after coming into effect. The attacks have also cast a shadow on the talks in Cairo to look at a permanent truce. Here's more.
This humanitarian ceasefire will commence at 8 a.m. local time on Friday, August 1st, 2014. It will last for a period of 72 hours unless extended. During this time, the forces on the ground will remain in place.
Within hours of an unconditional 72-hour humanitarian truce between Israel and Gaza being announced, it collapsed as a result of Israeli shelling. 50 Palestinians were reportedly killed in the shelling in the southern town of Rafah. Trucks carrying goods and supplies into Gaza were forced to turn back. Israeli forces are searching for one of their soldiers believed to have been captured. The military says the soldier went missing during an attack on forces trying to destroy a tunnel built into Israel from Gaza. Israel has accused Hamas of violating the UN-mediated truce. They say gunmen fired at Israeli soldiers in Rafah first. The 72-hour truce was announced after weeks of fighting and bloodshed. The ceasefire was to be followed by Israeli-Palestinian negotiations for a long-term solution. Both sides had agreed to go to Cairo for negotiations.
يعني هو الحقيقة الآن تجري اتصالات لسفر وفد سيمثل الأطراف الفلسطينية، وفد موحد من كل قوى المقاومة الفلسطينية، وستشارك به أيضا منظمة التحرير الفلسطينية. سيسافر إلى القاهرة فور سريان هذه التهدئة الإنسانية.
The parties obviously need to find a way to address Israel's security concerns and to ensure that the people of Gaza can live in safety and in dignity. And for our part, the United States will be sending a small delegation to Cairo to assist and take part in these negotiations.
Israel on Thursday resolved to continue its military operations in Gaza. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel won't stop operations till all tunnels built by militants from Gaza into Israel are destroyed. So far, the Israeli Operation Protective Edge that started on 8 July has claimed almost 1,500 Palestinian lives.
Well, the World Trade Organization failed to ratify an agreement designed to streamline the global trade system. A breakthrough was elusive despite a late push by the United States to convince India to reach a compromise that would have secured a deal. India's stand has been criticized by most members of the 160-nation body. Here's a report.
The World Trade Organization's 160 members have failed to agree to a global customs pact drawn up in meetings in Bali last December.
It is so agreed.
The trade facilitation agreement, which would have streamlined global customs procedures, should have been finalized by Thursday. But it was blocked over a number of rifts, including India's demands for concessions on the stockpiling of food. The WTO said it had not been possible to find a breakthrough. WTO Director General Roberto Azevedo said, "We have not been able to find a solution that would allow us to bridge that gap. Of course, it is true that everything remains in play until midnight. But at present, there is no workable solution on the table, and I have no indication that one will be forthcoming." Unquote. India had insisted that in exchange for signing the trade facilitation agreement, it must see more progress on a parallel pact, giving it more freedom to subsidize and stockpile food grains that is allowed by WTO rules. It got support from Cuba, Venezuela and Bolivia. On Thursday, the visiting United States delegation tried to persuade the center, but the Modi government remained firm on its stand.
We do not dismiss the concerns India has about large numbers of poor people who require some sort of food assurance and subsistence level. But we believe there's a way to provide for that that keeps faith with the WTO Bali agreement.
Nothing was mentioned in this meeting about WTO.
But your stand, ma'am.
Our stand remains the same.
Failure to achieve a consensus before the WTO's own deadline deals a severe blow to WTO's credibility. The trade easing deal was viewed as a way to create some momentum. China, Thailand and Mexico, among other large emerging markets, have publicly criticized India's stand on the issue. Pakistan too questioned India about its rice subsidies at WTO meetings.
Well, much else has been unfolding around the world. Here's a quick wrap of the other international news of the week. Liberia's government has announced the closing down of all schools across the country to stop the spread of the deadly Ebola virus. Some communities have been placed under quarantine as well. Non-essential government workers have been sent home for 20 days and the army deployed to enforce the measures. Doctors in Ivory Coast have also undertaken all measures to prevent the spread of Ebola. At least 6 people have been killed in a suicide bombing at a college in northern Nigeria's Kano city. The female bomber is reported to have blown herself up as students queued up to check their names on an admission list. The government said a 10-year-old girl with a suicide belt was arrested in a neighboring state. Boko Haram has been blamed for carrying out the attack. More than a dozen pro-government troops were killed in Syria after insurgents detonated explosives in 2 tunnels. The Syrian Observatory said the blasts killed at least 13 soldiers and pro-government fighters. Clashes between rebels belonging to groups including the Al-Qaeda-linked Nusra Front broke out with Assad's forces after the blasts and fighting flared into the night. Argentina failed to strike a deal to avert its second default in more than 12 years after talks with holdout creditors ended without a settlement on Wednesday. The country's economy minister Axel Kicillof announced this after 2 days of talks failed to produce an agreement. Investors are, however, demanding a full payout of $1.3 billion on bonds they hold. China has launched a formal investigation into one of Communist Party's most senior figures. Zhu Yongkang, the former domestic security chief and one of the nation's top 9 leaders until he retired in 2012, will be investigated for serious disciplinary violations. Specific allegations against him are not known. The probe breaks an unofficial taboo against investigating current and former members of the Politburo Standing Committee or their immediate relatives. Well, let's shift focus now and bring you up to date with all the sports action from around the world in our sports wrap. South African all-rounder Jack Callis, who retired from Test cricket in December, has decided to end his one-day international career. Callis made his decision after scoring only 5 runs from his final 3 ODIs in Sri Lanka last month. However, he intends to continue playing T20 cricket for Sydney Thunder and the Kolkata Knight Riders. Callis said that he had hoped to play for South Africa in next year's Cricket World Cup, but realised after his performance in Sri Lanka that it was a bridge too far to cross. Indian all-rounder Ravindra Jadeja will be allowed to appeal against a fine for his part in an incident involving England's James Anderson. Jadeja was fined 50% of his match fee for misconduct in a confrontation with Anderson during the drawn first test in Nottingham on July 10th. ICC regulations prevented Jadeja from contesting his fine after the match referee downgraded his offence to level 1 under the ICC's Code of Conduct. However, in a statement issued on Wednesday, the ICC said Jadeja would be allowed an appeal. English football club Everton has signed Chelsea striker Romelu Lukaku in a record-breaking £28 million deal. The club is aiming to challenge its city rival Liverpool with this transfer. Lukaku was on loan at Everton last season, where he was their leading scorer with 16 goals in 33 appearances. The Belgian has already scored 65 league goals at the age of 21, a figure matched only by Sergio Aguero. Spanish tennis star Rafael Nadal has suffered a right wrist injury less than a month before the start of the US Open in New York and has been ruled out of action for 2 to 3 weeks. Nadal hurt his wrist while training on Tuesday. Nadal said that he was extremely disappointed not to be defending his titles in Toronto and Cincinnati as he targets a return to fitness in time for the US Open, which starts on August 25th. Nadal has not competed since his shock defeat by Australian teenager Nick Kyrgios in the 4th round at Wimbledon on July 1st this year. Prosecutors have filed their final arguments before the High Court in the case of murder-accused Oscar Pistorius. The final argument in Pistorius' murder trial will now be heard on August 7th. Paralympian Pistorius is on trial for shooting dead his girlfriend Riva Steenkamp on February 14th last year. He claims he shot her by accident through the locked door of his toilet in his Pretoria home, thinking she was an intruder about to emerge and attack him. The state contends he killed her during an argument. It's time now to bring you up to date with all the international entertainment news in our entertainment wrap.
Led Zeppelin will soon unveil the unheard version of their most celebrated rock song of all time, Stairway to Heaven, which was recorded 40 years ago. An alternative take on the epic track by Jimmy Page and Robert Plant will be released on a new version of the band's fourth album, due out in September. A remastered version of the group's House of the Holy album will also be reissued. The Big Bang Theory Season 8 production has been delayed because the principal cast members have been fighting for higher salaries. Due to ongoing contract negotiations, production of the US sitcom, which was originally scheduled to begin on Thursday, had been postponed. The creator of the show, Chuck Lorre, said that he hoped the issue would be resolved swiftly and the actors would be given their due as they deserve it the most. Orlando Bloom reportedly threw a punch at Justin Bieber at Cipriani's in Ibiza. Sources reveal that Bloom and Bieber got into a scuffle at the restaurant. The scuffle took place in the presence of other celebrities like Lindsay Lohan, P. Diddy and Paris Hilton. Sources added that the crowd applauded when the Pirates of the Caribbean star almost punched the brash singer. Bieber left the restaurant when the cheering against him became too much. Sharon Stone, who earlier suffered a brain aneurysm, said that she thought she was dying even after she came home from hospital. The 56-year-old actress said that she was being wheeled down the hallway at one point on a gurney and she woke up and thought what's going on, and then a young intern said that they were taking her for a brain surgery. The Basic Instinct star said that when she woke up, she had to learn to walk, hear, write, talk, remember, and everything all over again. Penelope Cruz and her husband Javier Bardem have criticized Israel's incursion on Gaza and have described their military action as genocide. The 40-year-old Spanish actress, her husband, and Pedro Almodovar demanded a ceasefire by the Israeli military. In the open letter, they have called on the European Union to condemn the bombing by land, sea, and air against the Palestinian civil population in the Gaza Strip.
Well, that's all the time we have on this edition of World Panorama. Thank you so much for watching, but do join us again, same time, same place next week.